The story of inFAMOUS begins in medieval Europe, with an organization that would eventually become known as the First Sons. The group consisted of a radical collection of pseudoscientific thinkers who believed that certain individuals were capable of exhibiting abilities such as telekinesis, telepathy, and precognition if they focused all of their mental energy on realizing such feats. Branded as occultists, the group were forced to flee to the 13 colonies of America in the 17th century. There, their rituals and experiments are believed to have contributed to the hysteria that led to the Salem witch trials of 1692 and 93. It wasn't until after the American Civil War that the organization rose in popularity, following a concerted effort to expand its influence and recruit new members. This resurgence ultimately led to the arrival of a man named Richard Tate in 1892. Ascending to the head of the organization, Tate envisioned a world where modern science and emerging technologies could be used to understand and later unlock humanity's hidden potential. His vision transformed the First Sons throughout the early 20th century, turning the group from a persecuted cult into a secretive and futuristic research organization. Directly reflecting this change, the First Sons relocated to the capital of the world, Empire City. While little is known about this period, it's presumed that shortly after Tate's ascension, the group made one of their first major breakthroughs by identifying the gene responsible for their extraordinary abilities. Sometime later, they would discover that this gene functioned as a biological conduit, allowing certain individuals to channel their neuroelectrical energy into manifesting superhuman abilities. As such, the gene came to be known as the conduit gene, and those who possessed it were known simply as conduits. Sometime after discovering the conduit gene, the First Sons theorized that if a single individual's neuroelectrical energy could produce limited abilities, then channeling the energy of multiple non-conduit individuals into a single conduit could amplify their abilities to a much greater degree. This is likely what gave birth to a technology known as the Ray Sphere, a device that utilized ray field technology to harness the neuroelectrical energy from regular humans. Once harnessed, the energy would then be channeled into the nearest conduit, giving them extraordinarily powerful abilities. Yet it is probable that Richard Tate was not the one who saw this project through to completion, as by the mid to late 20th century, leadership of the First Sons had passed to Alden Tate, Richard's son. Building upon the foundation his father laid, Alden evidently continued development of the Ray Sphere well into the 21st century, until it ultimately came into the hands of a man named Cole McGrath. While very little is known about Cole's early life, what is known is that he was born in 1984, and that he lived a life of relative comfort. This fact would come to define Cole, as he often avoided hardship and ran from anything that challenged him. In his early adulthood, Cole met his best friends Zeke Dunbar and Trish Daly. Over the next few years, Cole grew incredibly close to the both of them, with Zeke encouraging his rebellious and avoidant nature, while Trish grounded him with her sense of responsibility and compassion. It was this very balance that made Cole fall in love with Trish, and eventually the two were married, with Zeke proudly standing as Cole's best man. It was around this nebulous period Cole's conduit gene was activated, giving him the ability to manipulate electricity. Though the specifics are unknown, it is likely that it wasn't all that tragic of a tale, and that the Ray Sphere was involved in some capacity. Regardless, Cole's electrokinesis abilities did little to shape his character. He remained a man focused solely on his family, on Trish and their 2 daughters, all living peaceful lives in Empire City. That is, until a beast of unimaginable power rose to challenge him. Faced with a power that rivaled his own, Cole did what he had always done. He ran. For years, he avoided his ultimate responsibility, fleeing from city to city as the world around him fell to ruins. By the time there was nowhere left to run, his family was all that was left to pay the price. It was at that very moment Cole finally understood what was required of him. He was not meant to save the world, but to shape another into doing so, a person that he would mold into a savior by any means necessary. To make this difficult choice, Cole became someone unrecognizable. He became Kessler, a man who had the strength to do what was necessary to prevent the world's destruction. Fueled by grief, Kessler used his newest and most dangerous power to travel on a one-way trip back in time to rewrite history. To accomplish what he set out to change, Kessler traveled back to the mid-20th century, where he assumed control of the First Sons during the transition period between Richard and Alden. In doing so, Alden Tate was thrown into the unforgiving streets of Empire City's Warren District. Stripped of his opulence, Alden dedicated his life to taking back what was rightfully his, and killing the man who took it from him. With complete control of the First Sons, Kessler initiated development of the Ray Sphere years, if not decades, before it began in his timeline. To fund this effort, Kessler established contact with DARPA, who were equally impressed and terrified by the First Sons' technological advancements. In 1984, Cole McGrath was born. To keep things predictable, Kessler likely did as little as possible to influence Cole's early life, mostly watching him grow from afar out of fascination, frustration, and pity. As Cole's life played out, Kessler expanded the First Sons to the city of New Marais. Sometime after this, a New Marais plutocrat named Joseph Bertrand III joined the First Sons. Fascinated by the potential of his own conduit gene, Bertrand did anything he could to assist the organization, believing that it was God's divine will that he be given extraordinary powers. Around the early 2000s, Cole met Zeke and Trish. Just as they did in Kessler's timeline, the three became good friends. Not long after, Cole dropped out of college just shy of graduating. While at the time he blamed this on one of his professors, he would later attribute it to his tenuous relationship with responsibility. With nowhere else to go, Cole and Zeke traveled to New Marais around 2006, where Cole became fascinated with parkour and urban exploration. Taking this hobby to its fullest extent, the two of them, alongside Trish, would later move to Empire City, where Cole utilized his parkour skills to explore the city's sewer network. It was during this time Trish got a job as a nurse, while Zeke did a number of odd jobs for cash. Cole, meanwhile, subverting the expectations his parents placed upon him, picked up a job as a measly bike courier. At some point, Kessler recruited Dr. Sebastian Wolf, the world's foremost expert on Rayfield energy, to the First Sons' New Marais division. During the early years of his recruitment, Wolf and Kessler grew to become close friends. As their friendship bloomed, Kessler began shedding light on his motives and intentions. This is how Wolf learned of the Beast, and later, what Kessler planned to use the Ray Sphere to accomplish. Just as Kessler had expected, Wolf reached out to the National Security Agency, or the NSA, who then appointed two known conduits among their ranks, John White and Lucy Kuo, to investigate the organization. John was ordered to infiltrate the First Sons' headquarters in Empire City, while Lucy Kuo was to oversee Wolf's contributions to their investigation in New Marais. Not long after this, John White began his infiltration of the First Sons by making contact with a mysterious woman who asked John if he had ever experienced any extrasensory abilities. John lied, stating that he had dream-based ESP and involuntary telekinesis. Later that night, John was taken to an undisclosed location, where he was told that he was going to be beaten to death and that the only way to put an end to it was to use his mind to stop the abuse. After hours of beatings, John was placed inside an infirmary for several days, then instructed to configure satellite dishes across Empire City. Seizing his opportunity, John used the satellite dishes to store dead drops, recounting his time undercover. Sometime later, John was tasked with protecting a woman named Sasha, a specialist in mind control techniques and application. It was during this period Sasha and Kessler rapidly developed a relationship that seemingly ended just as quickly as it had begun. In the wake of their falling out, John was reassigned to Kessler, where he would learn all about Kessler's prophetic vision of the world's destruction at the hands of a powerful conduit known as the Beast. Shortly after John was assigned to Kessler, the First Sons conducted their first successful ray sphere experiment, which had given a simple rat super strength and flight. The rat did go on to kill 3 guards, however Kessler saw this as nothing short of a resounding success. Sometime later, the ray sphere was sent to New Marais, where Wolf was tasked with increasing its capabilities. It was during this period Wolf discovered 2 byproducts of the ray sphere, those being blast cores and rayosite. Blast cores were expended cores of the ray sphere that had been infused with concentrated ray field energy, making them capable of further enhancing the abilities of activated conduits. Likewise, rayosite were fragments of supercharged Earth that had been infused with ray field energy, making them an incredibly efficient energy storage medium. As Wolf made these many discoveries, he collected the materials for himself, and of course, documented everything he learned onto thumb drives that he then attached to carrier pigeons. It was vaguely around this period Kessler met with Bertrand to inform him of the Beast. Believing it was his destiny to stop it, Bertrand ordered Wolf to construct a low-yield nuclear warhead in preparation for its eventual arrival. When Wolf was eventually finished with his work on the ray sphere, Kessler ordered him to send it back to Empire City. Worried about the implications of this, Wolf asked to be extracted by the NSA. John refused, stating that they had not yet collected enough evidence to bring down the entire organization in one swift move. Around late summer 2010, Kessler began growing curious about what would happen if a single conduit was exposed to the ray sphere multiple times, hypothesizing that such an act might increase or even negate a conduit's abilities. To test his hypothesis, he reached out to a First Son security guard named David Warner, promising to pay off his debts if he agreed to some sort of experiment. Over the next few weeks, Kessler exposed David to the ray sphere a total of 11 times, each exposure unlocking a fresh suite of abilities. The only downside being that with every exposure, David's grip on reality loosened, meaning that such a development would not be useful for his plans for Cole. However, it would be of use to the United States government. As such, Kessler invited DARPA agent Moya Jones to Empire City, where he explained the basics of conduit biology to her before demonstrating the incredible effects of the ray sphere on David once more. By late 2010, Kessler was ready to make his move. By the time John realized what this meant, Kessler had already put the ray sphere in possession of a bike messaging service with precise instructions that the nondescript package be delivered by Cole McGrath to 19 and Sloat in the Historic District, the most densely populated section of the city. By the time John tracked the sphere to Cole, he found him impatiently waiting at a red light. As John positioned his pistol at Cole's head, Cole bolted into the intersection, narrowly avoiding his death in more ways than one. Upon arriving at 19th and Sloat at exactly 7 p.m., Cole attempted to pawn the package off to the residents of the address. When they refused, Kessler called Cole, offering him a whopping $500 to open the package himself. Doing as instructed, Cole opened the package, finding a spherical metallic device unlike anything he had ever seen. As Cole held the device in his hands, the ray sphere, set to activate at exactly 7:02 p.m., detonated. Over the next few seconds, the ray sphere engulfed nearly 5 square blocks in pure ray field energy, channeling the neuroelectric energy from thousands of non-conduit civilians into Cole, as well as Sasha and Alden. The expansion that followed scattered hundreds of blast shards across the city, and bathed those who survived the initial explosion in a fatal dose of ray field radiation that would later manifest as the plague. In the end, thousands of civilians were killed in the blast, including Trisha's sister, Amy. All of this, the destruction, the chaos, the death, while devastating, was precisely what Kessler wanted. By making Cole's life unbearably difficult, by forcing him to endure complete isolation, absolute loss and debilitating guilt, Kessler would have forged Cole into the savior he never was. In the moments following the blast, Kessler, John, and a DARPA helicopter all made their way toward the epicenter of the explosion. The first to arrive was John, who took the ray sphere from Cole's scorched corpse before fleeing to a nearby parking garage. Less concerned about the ray sphere than he was its recipient, Kessler checked Cole's vitals to ensure that his greatest asset was in working order. Startled by Kessler's voice, Cole jolted awake, finding himself surrounded by the hellish aftermath of the blast. It was then the DARPA helicopter stumbled upon the scene, ordering Cole to rendezvous with the other survivors at the bridge. Guided by Zeke, Cole made his way to the bridge, while the helicopter peeled off in pursuit of the ray sphere. At the bridge, Cole unintentionally summoned a lightning storm, exhausting him to the point of unconsciousness. The authorities overwhelmed Trish and Zeke took Cole to Trish's apartment, where she established a makeshift hospital room to aid in Cole's recovery. The following day, Moya confronted Kessler about the blast, ordering him to hand over the ray sphere immediately. After establishing that she was in absolutely no position to make demands, he told her that it was in possession of an NSA agent named John White. One day later, Cole woke up for the first time. Unable to control his abilities, he stopped his own heart for about 6 minutes before his pulse returned. Later that same night, John lost all hopes of extraction, forcing him to attempt escaping the city himself. It was around that same point Alden established his own faction within the Warren district known as the Dustmen, planning to use them during this period of chaos to regain control of the First Sons. With that, Alden's first goal was to get his hands on the ray sphere. 4 days after the blast, Empire City had all but torn itself apart. Instances of looting, murder, and kidnapping skyrocketed just as quickly as supplies dwindled. Made worse when the federal government officially quarantined the city, something Kessler himself enacted to keep Cole from running away. Left to fend for themselves, the city plunged into chaos. That same morning, Cole woke up once more, unable to grasp the reality of what had happened to him in the city. Later that night, Alden's Dustmen attacked John in his sleep, trapping him in rubble as they took off with the ray sphere. With the ray sphere in hand, Alden had his men collect any and everything that wasn't tied to the ground. Using his extraordinary telekinetic abilities, Alden then constructed a massive tower that served as both a fortified compound to protect the ray sphere and a testament to Alden's extraordinary power. The next morning, Cole practiced using his abilities at Zeke's request. When news that an electric man resided in the Neon District reached John, he recognized Cole from the day of the blast. With this, John had 2 clear goals: find the ray sphere and keep tabs on this electric man. The former he planned to accomplish using a handful of spy drones he had stashed in the Warren, while the latter he planned to do the old-fashioned way. It was likely around this point John got into contact with Quo and Wolf, informing them of the plague and the NSA's ignorance toward the beast. Ultimately, the 3 of them decided to go rogue, as they felt that they were the only ones who understood the gravity of the situation. To this end, Wolf began working on a device known as the Ray Field Inhibitor, or RFI. While the precise science is unclear, the RFI was effectively an anti-ray sphere, giving Wolf and the others a method of eliminating the plague and neutralizing conduits. Over the next week, Sasha, using her newfound mind control abilities, kidnapped hundreds of thugs and civilians off the streets, pumping them full of a hallucinogenic tar-like substance to turn them into her minions. Released back into the Neon, the group became known as the Reapers. During the same period, Moya, unable to track down John, devised a plan that would involve manipulating Cole into finding John and the ray sphere by promising that she could help him pass the quarantine. Knowing that it was only a matter of time until he attempted to leave the city, she simply waited until the time was right. 2 weeks after the blast, the First Sons threatened to kill the voice of survival, a popular post-blast TV personality, if he didn't broadcast propaganda that implicated Cole as the sole terrorist responsible for the blast. Not long after, Kessler arranged for a crate of supplies to be airdropped into Archer Square to draw Cole out into the open. When Cole and Zeke reached Archer Square, Cole used his abilities to free the supplies. It was at that point Cole was presented with a choice: leave the supplies for those less fortunate than himself, or shock the public into submission to take what he had rightfully earned. Ultimately, Cole decided to leave the supplies, setting him on the path to becoming the city's guardian. As if the world itself was challenging Cole's choices, the Voice of Survival broadcasted security footage of Cole taken just minutes before the blast, urging the citizens of Empire City to hunt him down. Made infamous in the eyes of the public, he and Zeke made a swift decision to leave the city, made all the easier when Trish, who up until this point had viewed Cole as a tragic victim of the blast, couldn't prevent herself from pinning her sister's death on the man she loved. Wasting no time, Cole, Zeke, and at least a dozen civilians battled their way through the stamped-in bridge, where they were quickly met with an impenetrable wall of machine gun fire. As bullets ripped through the crowd, Zeke threw himself off the bridge, followed closely by Cole, who leapt headfirst into a decontamination chamber. Inside, Moya greeted Cole by name, stating that she was an FBI agent in search of John White, her supposed husband who had gone missing following his infiltration of the First Sons. She then explained the basics of conduit biology and the race sphere before proposing that Cole find John in exchange for his freedom. With little choice but to accept, Cole reluctantly returned to the city. Later that night, Moya tasked Cole with tracking down a handful of John's dead drops, clearing a group of Reapers from a clinic, tracking down a contact of Moya's who had fled to the sewers, and restoring power to 2 Neon District substations, expanding Cole's abilities in the process. During this period, Sasha began pumping tar into the water main to expand her reach. Cole was then sent to halt the flow of water by closing various valves and destroying the source of the contamination under Memorial Park. The following day, Cole was sent to restore power to the 3rd substation, then rescue a train of trapped civilians from the Reapers. Having performed countless heroic duties thanklessly up until this point, Cole was surprised to see the crowd actually thank him for his service. Solidified as the city's champion, Cole was then ordered to deal with kegs of tar that had been installed on various water towers around the Neon. As he dealt with the final one, Kessler decided it was time to reveal himself to Cole, to show him what exactly was at stake if he couldn't fulfill his potential. Leaping toward Cole, Kessler revealed devastating visions of his past, of the world-ending cataclysm that his inaction had caused. The next morning, Moya sent Cole to restore power to the final substation while she worked to uncover Sasha's location. Once the power was back online, Cole helped Trish defend a crate of medical supplies from the Reapers. Around the same time, Moya discovered that Sasha was hiding in the Jefferson Tunnel and dispatched Cole to eliminate her. After fighting through dozens of Reapers, Cole finally confronted Sasha. Just as their battle came to a conclusion, the First Son stormed in, captured her, and collapsed the tunnel, forcing Cole to escape to the slums of the Warren. After powering on the first substation, Cole lowered the drawbridge between the Warren and the Neon, then helped Zeke search for an acquaintance of his named Dwight, with Zeke believing that it would score him some good karma with Dwight's sister. When Cole found Dwight dead, Zeke asked him to, at the very least, track his killer so he would have some good news to tell Dwight's sister. After doing as instructed, Cole returned to Zeke's rooftop to get some sleep, while Zeke met up with his date. However, it didn't go exactly as planned, as instead of spending the night with Zeke, she reinforced that she viewed him as a friend. Feeling a bit powerless, especially when compared to Cole, Zeke decided that it was time he take matters into his own hands to earn the respect he desired. The following morning, Cole powered up yet another substation, while Zeke made the mistake of investigating a Dustman shipyard alone, resulting in his capture. When Cole eventually saved him, he scolded Zeke for his recklessness. Left with practically no other options, Zeke made the uncharacteristic choice to assist law enforcement, particularly an officer named Warden Harms, the de facto head of the fractured Empire City Police Department. Cole during this period was ordered by Moya to collect data from a handful of drones that had been spotted patrolling the Warren district. As Cole collected the drones, Kessler, who had been torturing Sasha to create a hallucinogenic gas, reached out to Cole to note the importance of discipline. That in order to beat him, he would have to abandon any comfort he may have felt he was owed. While Moya analyzed the drone data, the Dustmen tried to break out of the quarantine by loading boats with hostages, hoping that the military wouldn't open fire on them. Concluding that this escalation would no doubt result in her being replaced, Moya ordered Cole to decommission the ships. Afterward, Cole assisted Trish in escorting a bus full of medical supplies to the Bayview Hospital in the Warren. As the fortified bus approached the hospital, Cole was knocked to the ground as Alden flung the bus, Trish included, to the roof of the hospital. Without hesitation, Cole ascended the hospital and saved Trish. Rattled into honesty, Trish apologized to Cole for treating him as if he was in any way responsible for Amy's death, and that she wanted nothing more than to mend their relationship. The next day, Warden Harms led a large-scale raid of a Dustman compound to capture Alden. To support the effort, Moya sent Cole to tail Alden through the compound. In the end, Cole drew enough attention away from the police that they managed to place Alden in custody. In retaliation, the Dustmen began terrorizing the streets of the Warren, destroying any and everything they could to wear law enforcement thin. Later that day, the Dustmen led an all-out raid on Eagle Point Penitentiary to break Alden free. As Cole defended the exterior of the prison, Zeke was ordered to keep an eye on Alden inside the prison, an order he selfishly ignored, resulting in Alden's escape. The following morning, Cole powered on another substation to take his mind off of Zeke's failure. Directly afterward, John contacted Cole, telling him to meet him atop the Adams building alone, where he planned to recruit him in his hunt for the Ray Sphere. Assuming John would want his wife to know about the meeting, Cole shared the news with Moya, much to her surprise. At the meeting point, the arrival of what is assumed to be a DARPA helicopter forced John to flee north, where he then disappeared without a trace. Though rattled, John had no choice but to place his trust in Cole, informing him of the Ray Sphere's location atop Alden's tower and that he had been duped by Moya. Wanting nothing more than to get his hands on the Ray Sphere and put an end to the chaos, Cole called on Zeke to help, believing it to be his chance at redemption. At the tower's zenith, Cole fended off Alden's forces, while Zeke ripped the Ray Sphere from Alden's makeshift throne. By the time Kessler arrived, Zeke managed to rip the Ray Sphere free. As he stood there, transfixed on the power that lay in his hands, Zeke couldn't resist the temptation. With one swift motion, Zeke activated the Ray Sphere, fully aware of the lives it would claim. Luckily for those lives, Zeke did not possess the conduit gene, nullifying the effects of the Ray Sphere. Kessler, however, claimed to know what went wrong, and offered Zeke an opportunity to fulfill his dream if he joined him. With little hesitation, Zeke accepted Kessler's offer, leaving Cole dumbfounded as Alden spiraled into a fit of rage. When the dust settled, Alden's rampage had nearly reached the historic district. Following in his wake, Cole eventually confronted Alden on the bridge to the historic. During this period, Kessler, opposed to what he had promised Zeke, imprisoned him to keep Cole focused on his next trial. Up until this point, Cole had been stripped of practically everything he ever cared about, starting with his comfort, then his anonymity, and most recently, his best friend. All that was left for Kessler to take was the one thing they both cherished most of all. When Cole finally managed to cripple Alden, Alden pleaded for his life, offering to help Cole stop Kessler. As Cole contemplated the offer, Alden threw himself into the river below, where he would later be captured by Moya. In the historic district, Cole was immediately tasked with lowering the bridge to the Warren. As he did so, Kessler made his move. To better understand Cole's new motives, he set up a series of bombs around the district, all of which he would have to disarm if he wanted to save Trish. Following the trail of explosives to its end, Cole was presented with an impossible decision. From one building, Kessler had hung 6 doctors, each capable of saving thousands in their lifetime. From the other hung Trish, the love of their life. With just enough time to save one, Cole was forced to choose between the life of one or the life of the many. With a heavy heart, Cole ascended the building with the doctors. At the apex, he watched as Trish was sent plummeting to the ground, where she was immediately killed on impact. Jumping after her, Cole used his powers to revive her for a few precious seconds, in which Trish stated that she was proud of the hero he had become and that she loved him. That night, Cole buried Trish in the park alongside countless others that had died in the blast. Kessler, meanwhile, unable to live with the reality of what he had just done, drowned his guilt in alcohol. It was in this intoxicated state he stumbled into Zeke's cell to simply be in his presence. The next morning, Cole awoke at the foot of Trish's grave, determined to find the Ray Sphere and end Kessler's life. It was during this same period Kessler deployed hot air balloons around the city to disperse Sasha's hallucinogenic gas. After restoring power to the Historic, Cole was tasked by John with disarming the balloons, then assisting him in destroying 3 Ray Sphere signal jammers around the city. The following morning, John narrowed the location of the Ray Sphere to the heavily fortified Examiner building. Before he could gas the building to secure it, Cole was tasked with destroying the First Son's anti-aircraft implements. Once accomplished, John dropped a payload of fentanyl gas onto the building, forcing the First Sons to mobilize. Tailing the truck, Cole and John eventually cornered the Ray Sphere at the end of a dock. Thinking back to all that had happened in the past week, Cole put everything he had into destroying the device. The abundance of energy overloaded the device, spawning a vortex that, to Cole, appeared as if it destroyed both John and the Ray Sphere. And in a sense, it did. Both John and the Ray Sphere were no longer. Bound on the atomic level, the two had been reborn into something new, a beast of immeasurable power that had one deeply instinctual purpose: destroy the world as it was. Force evolution's hand by awakening as many conduits as it could, regardless of the cost. In the wake of the Ray Sphere's destruction, Kessler contacted Cole to note his disappointment, that the lives of a few hundred were worth the sacrifice if it meant that Cole would be strong enough to face what was coming. Cole, however, noted that that was precisely why he did it. That, if anything, the past week had shown him that it wasn't about preserving as many lives as he could, but about treating each individual life as if it were invaluable. Upon hearing this, Kessler knew that Cole was ready for his final test. He had proven time and time again that he was capable of shouldering the responsibility, of making the tough choice even if it was one that Kessler disagreed with. All that was left at this point was for Cole to prove his strength. Drawn to the place where it all began, Cole and Kessler gave it everything they had. As the battle raged, Kessler shared stories of Cole's life, of the countless times he had squandered his potential because he was too weak to shoulder the responsibility. By the time Kessler was far too weak to fight, Cole put everything he had into ending his life. On the brink of death, Kessler used the last of his strength to reveal the truth, that he and Cole were one and the same, that he had gone back in time to shape Cole into a man who could do the one thing he failed to do. As Kessler drew his final breath, Cole didn't feel one shred of satisfaction. Yet another thing that Kessler had taken from him. It was at that moment Cole accepted the responsibility he had been given. Channeling his rage, Cole vowed that when the beast arrived, he would be ready. In the weeks following the blast, Bertrand, envious of the incredible power those like Cole, Sasha, and Alden had been given, ordered Dr. Wolf to create a Ray Sphere of his very own. Following its completion, Bertrand took the prototype Ray Sphere, alongside dozens of what he deemed to be outcasts, to the swamps just outside New Marais. Witnessing the event from the edge of the blast radius was a young, unsuspecting conduit named Nyx, who had followed her kidnapped family to the site. Upon the Ray Sphere's activation, the neuroelectric energy from the civilians was concentrated into Nyx and Bertrand. While Nyx was given what can only be described as napalm manipulation, Bertrand was turned into a monster. His worst nightmare realized, Bertrand demanded Wolf reverse the effects of the Ray Sphere. When Wolf stated it was impossible, Bertrand's entire perspective on conduits flipped. Up until this point, his hubris had always led him to believe that he was chosen, destined for greatness simply because he carried the conduit gene. But when he was made into a monster rather than the enlightened being he expected, his pride curdled into self-hatred. Unable to bear the truth of what he had become, he reasoned that this transformation was proof that the conduit gene was the mark of the devil, a hidden potential within mankind to punish those who lusted for power. Yet it wasn't until he stumbled upon one of Wolf's blast cores that Bertrand understood what he was meant to do. Given a new ability to corrupt humans, turning them into monsters not unlike himself, Bertrand's purpose was made crystal clear. He was made a conduit not to be a beacon of divinity, but to show the world why conduits needed to be extinguished. Following this revelation, Bertrand devised a plan that involved creating an army of conduits that he would then sell to the highest bidder, inspiring the world to view conduits as nothing more than weapons of mass destruction. To this end, Bertrand used his new ability to create an army of corrupted monsters that he then used to terrorize the streets of New Marais. Unequipped to handle the corrupted threat, the New Marais police force was practically wiped out. To fill the void, Bertrand established a militia that seemed to be the only ones capable of handling the threat. With absolute control over New Marais, Bertrand then campaigned for the eradication of conduits, who he labeled as deviants. One such deviant was a mysterious witch or ghost who patrolled the swamps of New Marais in an effort to dismantle all that Bertrand had built. While Empire City had found relative stability due to Cole's heroics, the city was far from safe. 24 days of quarantine had stripped it of all its resources, leaving many to starve or succumb to the plague. Made worse, the government continued to downplay the severity of the situation, leaving Cole as the city's last hope. Knowing this full well, Warden Harms sought out Cole at the one place he could count on him being. At the foot of Trish's grave, Harms convinced Cole to finish what he started by ending the First Sons once and for all. Meanwhile, Moya was given the authority to enact an invasion of Empire City to secure Cole in the interest of national security. To this end, Moya gathered a handful of volunteers aboard the USS George Washington, an aircraft carrier stationed just outside the Neon District, in an attempt to create conduits of her own to take Cole down. Later that night, David escaped containment after 5 long months of torture and over 30 ray sphere exposures, the effects of which made him reliant on neuroelectric energy to sustain himself, as well as gave him the ability to smell people on the genetic level. And seeing as how Cole and Kessler shared the same DNA, David had but one simple goal. The following day, Moya's strike team conducted a raid on a Reaper stronghold, taking Sasha into federal custody. With Sasha out of the equation, she gave the green light to initiate the invasion, while she used Sasha to synthesize a hallucinogenic gas to incapacitate Cole. Meanwhile in the Warren, Cole wrestled with Kessler's lingering presence. The disturbing truth that Kessler had shaped him into the man he'd become meant that his ghost haunted Cole's every action. In an attempt to break Cole's notion that Kessler was anything greater than a man, Zeke shared the story of his time in Kessler's custody, showing Cole just how flawed Kessler really was. Just then, Moya's invasion began. As Cole, Zeke, and the police dealt with the troops in the Warren, David tore through the troops in the Neon, then made his way to the Warren using the sewer system. When Cole was finally given a moment to breathe, Moya presented him with an ultimatum: turn himself in by morning or watch as she knocked the city back to the Stone Age. As Cole contemplated what to do, David attacked Eagle Point Penitentiary. Forced into protecting her asset, Moya ordered a drone strike on David's position, allowing Cole a moment to escape. Tormented by Kessler's ghost, the threat of the invasion, and this new mysterious monster, Cole, falling back on old habits, abandoned his responsibility. Around the same time, 2 reporters named Linda Kaufman and Phil Amabe snuck into Empire City to uncover the truth behind the quarantine. The following morning, Zeke and Harms made their way to the Neon using the city's underground evacuation tunnels. During the trip, Zeke shared the story of his betrayal atop Alden's tower, noting that he was doing all he could to earn Cole's trust back. Having experience in rehabilitation, Harms told Zeke that if he wanted forgiveness, he would first have to forgive himself. When they eventually surfaced, they were just in time to watch Moya's strike team ambush Cole using Sasha's hallucination gas. Unable to save him alone, they decided to gather all the reinforcements they could before going after Cole. Sometime later, Linda and Phil managed to find their way to a makeshift clinic in the sewers of the Neon, where they finally learned the truth about the so-called Electric Man and the government's inaction. Later that day, David attacked the USS George Washington, giving Sasha an opportunity to free Cole. As Cole stumbled his way to solid ground, Sasha went after Moya. Moya, meanwhile, released her experimental conduits to stop David. She and Sasha then fought tooth and nail before Sasha jumped into the water, never to be seen again. Meanwhile, David made quick work of Moya's conduits. Witnessing the rampage directly in front of him, Cole once again had that familiar urge to run, to give in to that deep-seated fear of failure by giving up before he even had a chance to fail. However, Cole realized that in doing so, he would be abandoning the lessons that had shaped him over the past month. That by running, he would be no better than a coward, no better than Kessler. Embracing his destiny, Cole rushed toward David, giving him all he had despite the risk. In the end, Cole was successful in freeing David of his torment. As the Washington sank, Moya positioned a gun at Cole's head, telling him that she could make his life hell with a single call. Just then, the ship shifted, positioning Moya directly above the abyss. Hanging on with the last of her strength, she watched as Cole reached out to save her, despite all that she had done. Perhaps believing that the world was a better place with Cole in it, Moya let go of the pole, giving Cole just enough time to escape as she sank to the bottom of the ocean. Having captured the entire event, Phil and Linda leaked everything to the public just 2 days later, proving the existence of conduits and the humanitarian crisis from within the city. When the news reached New Marais, Quo reached out to Cole, presumably to inform him that she planned to meet with him. Just after Quo left for Empire City, Bertrand took the news of Kessler's death as an opportunity to seize control of the First Son's assets in New Marais. Included in this list of assets was Wolf, who Bertrand supplied with nearly triple the budget as long as Wolf did anything Bertrand required of him. While terrified, Wolf remained compliant, hoping that the increased budget would allow him to finish the RFI much faster. Over the next few weeks, Wolf, under Bertrand's orders, developed a handful of devices, the most notable of which was the Power Transfer Device, a device capable of transferring one conduit's powers to another. When the transfer device was complete, Bertrand brought in an elite group of men from a private military firm in South Africa called Vermach 88. Ignoring Wolf's instructions, Bertrand used the transfer device to give dozens of men powers simultaneously. As forewarned, this pushed the men past their mental limit, forcing Bertrand to put the men in stasis until they were ready to be shipped out to their buyers. Roughly 1 month after Kessler's death, Quo met with Cole in Empire City. While she quickly found that he was hesitant to accept help from yet another female agent, he was extremely receptive to her claim that Wolf would amplify his powers. With Cole on board, Quo used everything in her power to end the quarantine and find transport out of the city. In New Marais, meanwhile, Bertrand's militia tightened its grip on the city even further. Fearing his assets would be seized, Wolf hid many of his blast cores around the city before completing the final steps to finish the RFI. Not long after her arrival, Quo managed to secure passage on the first cargo freighter out of Empire City following the end of the quarantine. Just minutes before the group's scheduled departure to New Marais, the beast finally managed to pull itself back together. John's mind not yet recovered, its instinct drove it to destroy everything in its path. Facing his destiny, Cole put everything he had into stopping it. Yet, just as he feared, it simply wasn't enough. Drained of his power, Cole was taken to recover aboard the cargo freighter, while the beast used its immense power as a walking ray sphere to wipe Empire City off the map. In doing so, it had activated the abilities of the conduits inside its blast radius, curing at least a few of those within the city of a plague that would have claimed all of their lives otherwise. Restless in the face of insurmountable odds, Cole and Zeke worked on a new weapon for Cole called the Amp, while Quo made preparations for their arrival in New Marais. As Cole traveled south, the Beast tore through city after city, activating hundreds of conduits in the process. Faced with a threat unlike any other, the US military threw everything it had at the monster. It was during this period, a soldier named Brooke Augustine was caught in the Beast's path. After her conduit abilities were activated, she quickly found another survivor, a little girl named Celia Pendergast. As the two roamed the ruins left in the Beast's wake, Augustine witnessed innocent conduits being lynched out of fear and ignorance. Sympathetic to their suffering, Augustine, from that moment onward, vowed to protect her kind by any means necessary. By the time Cole reached New Marais, Quo used her NSA contacts to requisition a small fishing boat to traverse the swamps outside the city. When they approached the militia blockade, Quo tasked Cole with eliminating the soldiers blocking their path. To help him do so, Zeke handed Cole the Amp. Using his new weapon, Cole escorted the tugboat to the shore of New Marais, where he was then sent to collect one of Wolf's blast cores. As he collected it, Wolf's lab exploded, sending hundreds of blast shards throughout New Marais. At the source of the explosion, Cole met with Wolf, who explained that he would need to collect more blast cores if he wanted to become powerful enough to use the RFI. Without hesitation, Cole absorbed the blast core's energy, expanding his abilities and putting him one step closer to using the RFI. Before Cole returned to consciousness, the militia attempted to take both him and Wolf into custody. While they managed to grab Wolf, Zeke arrived just in time to save Cole. To keep Cole busy while she tracked down Wolf, Quo had Cole collect Wolf's dead drops, as well as blast shards that had been scattered by the explosion. Later that night, Cole and Zeke attended a rally held by Bertrand at St. Ignatius Cathedral. Before Cole could confront Bertrand, a group of corrupted interrupted the event. When Cole eventually caught up to Bertrand's getaway limo, a helicopter cut their conversation short. No closer to finding Wolf, Quo used her old New Marais contact to track down Wolf's interrogator. 3 hours later, Cole tailed him to Wolf's location. When the coast was clear, Cole escorted Quo and Wolf from the militia. Before they could reach safety, their vehicle was struck head-on by a militia semi-truck, killing Wolf on impact, while Quo and Cole were ejected from the vehicle. With barely enough strength to get to safety, Cole could only watch as the militia took off with Quo. While Cole recovered his strength, Quo was hooked up to the powered transfer device. 4 hours later, Zeke unearthed rumors of a woman who had escaped a militia lynch mob and fled to the swamp. Believing it was Quo, Zeke sent Cole to investigate while he set up a little slice of home. Just before Cole was about to call it quits, he ran into Nix, who had collected a blast core from one of the militiamen. Nix agreed to hand the blast core over to Cole if Cole helped her torch a militia lynch mob. After doing so, Nix, as promised, handed over the blast core. When Cole returned to Zeke's rooftop, Zeke revealed that he had joined the militia to track down Quo's whereabouts. Still burned by Zeke's betrayal, Cole remarked that he better not wake up in a militia cage just before he absorbed the power of his second blast core. As Cole experimented with his new abilities, Zeke discovered that the militia were holding conduits prisoner under the carriage house. When he shared this news with Cole, Nix appeared to give her 2 cents, namely that they should use an explosives-filled rail car to blow a hole in the militia's defenses. Zeke, meanwhile, suggested that they instead free imprisoned cops to help combat the overwhelming militia presence. Ultimately agreeing with Zeke, Cole destroyed a militia prison convoy, releasing dozens of cops who wanted nothing more than to fight back against the militia. Backed by the police, Cole cleared the militia guarding the carriage house. Inside the facility, Cole broke Quo free from her restraints. However, in the process of doing so, he accidentally freed the Vermont 88 soldiers, whose minds had been completely fried as a result of the strain put on the transfer device. 8 hours later, Cole went to restore power in Ascension Parish, while Zeke helped Quo recover. When the power was restored, Zeke sent Cole to rescue a girl who had been kidnapped and made a sacrifice to the corrupted. When she was freed, Sarah escorted Cole to her uncle, Roscoe LaRoche, the leader of the resistance against Bertrand. Seeing as they both wanted Bertrand and the militia gone, Cole and LaRoche agreed to work together. They were then attacked by a devourer, which Cole quickly defeated. When Quo had fully recovered, she met up with Cole at St. Charles Cemetery to both get a hang of her abilities and track down another blast core. After finding it, Cole met up with Zeke, who had unknowingly contracted the plague. Ignoring what he assumed was a simple cough, Zeke stated his prediction that the transfer device was going to be sent to Fort St. Philippe. In preparation for its eventual arrival, Cole absorbed his third blast core. The following morning, Nyx led Cole to the swamps to share the story of how her and Bertrand were given powers. Afterward, everyone met at Zeke's rooftop to discuss the plan to clear Fort Philippe and secure the transfer device. Quo insisted that they secure LaRoche's rebels by providing them with the militia's medical supplies. Nyx believed that rather than helping them, they should inspire the rebels by framing her as a member of the militia and letting Cole save them from her. Trusting Quo's instincts, Cole delivered an ambulance full of medical supplies to LaRoche. Backed by LaRoche's rebels, Quo, Cole, and Nyx led an assault on the fort. When the transfer device was secure, Cole didn't hesitate to propose that they use it to share powers. Eager to do so herself, Nyx backed Cole's decision. While hesitant, Quo offered to step up, if only to keep Cole from siding with Nyx. Forced to choose between the two of them, Cole ultimately sided with Quo. As the two of them powered up the device, Bertrand cut the transfer process short by destroying the device. Still dazed by the attack, Cole fired a blast at Bertrand's helicopter before passing out. Around dusk, Cole awoke to discover that he had gained a portion of Quo's ice abilities, but that Quo had received nothing in return. Afterward, he made his way to Bertrand's helicopter crash site, where he found a giant monster. After weakening it, Bertrand shrouded himself in a cloud of filth, hoping that this would allow him to get away unseen. It was in that split second, Cole saw Bertrand for who he really was before he escaped to Floodtown. Tailing Bertrand, Cole's first priority was restoring power to Floodtown, which had been overrun by Vermach 88 ice soldiers. During this period, LaRoche stumbled upon a blast core, which he agreed to give to Cole in exchange for his assistance. When power was restored, Zeke and LaRoche recruited Cole to defend groups of refugees from the corrupted and plug gas wells throughout the town. As promised, LaRoche handed the blast core over to Zeke. When Cole met up with him and Quo, having read Wolf's journal, informed Cole and Zeke of the RFI's ability to cure the plague. Motivated more than ever, Cole absorbed his fifth blast core. In the morning, Cole met with the group to discuss Bertrand's connection to the ice soldiers. Nyx then shared her theory that Bertrand was the source of the corrupted, and that the best way to combat Bertrand would be to tame a group of corrupted themselves. Skeptical, Quo offered to help Cole prove Nyx's theory, and expose Bertrand's schemes to the public. Having trusted Quo so far, Cole helped her collect evidence around the rail yard, then images of Bertrand in the act. Released to the public, Bertrand was forced to go into hiding. Meanwhile, Nyx took it upon herself to tame an army of corrupted. Loyal to her and her alone, Nyx couldn't help but view them as her children. It was around this point Zeke uncovered the nuke Bertrand commissioned from Wolf. Hoping it could slow the beast's approach, he requested Cole help him in escorting it to the docks. Once arrived, Cole used the nuke's laser guidance targeting system to target the beast. As the nuke made contact, the energy of the explosion broke every atomic bond within its body, wiping it from the face of the Earth. In the aftermath of the explosion, Cole, believing that they had succeeded, escorted Zeke to safety. As he did so, the beast rematerialized just as it did in Empire City, proving that it would not be as easily destroyed as they first assumed. The fate of the world at stake, Cole's first priority was restoring power to Gasworks, where Zeke had learned that Bertrand had stashed a blast core. Just before power was restored, Bertrand trapped Cole in order to propose that the two of them work together to combat the beast. Fully aware that Bertrand was the furthest thing from honorable and honest, Cole refused. With no use for Cole, Bertrand ordered his men to open fire. Minutes later, Zeke arrived to save Cole from his execution. It was at that point, Cole finally forgave Zeke for what he did in Empire City and apologized for treating him so harshly over the past month. After the much-deserved apology, Zeke pointed Cole to the next blast core, which was supposedly hidden within a safe in a nearby warehouse. Upon opening it, however, Cole found property deeds to 3 other warehouses, the final of which held the blast core, as well as evidence of Bertrand's conduit trafficking ring. Returning to Zeke's roof, the two of them hung out for presumably the first time since Kessler's death. When Cole awoke hours later, he absorbed the energy of the 6th blast core. The following morning, Zeke sent Cole to decommission Bertrand's conduit shipments before they could leave the city, as he destroyed the final cargo ship. The Beast, taking the form of John White, appeared to Cole to show him its perspective. To do so, it gave Cole the ability to sense the plague and the conduit gene within humans, then sent him to investigate a nearby plague ward. When Cole found the conduit within the ward, the Beast demonstrated its true power by funneling the neuroelectric energy from the dying humans into the conduit, curing them of the plague by activating their abilities. Before Cole could even comprehend what he had just witnessed, Zeke roped him into one final mission to defeat Bertrand. With the rebels, Quo and Nyx at their back, Zeke sent Cole to confront Bertrand at the Malloy building, where he pressed Bertrand until he showed his true form. As nothing more than a mindless monster, Bertrand chased Cole throughout the gasworks, where LaRoche had set up a number of traps to weaken and eventually kill the monster who had torn New Marais apart. With Bertrand out of the picture, Cole met with Zeke to track down the final blast core Cole needed to use the RFI. As they scouted its location, Zeke fell into another coughing fit, leading Cole to confirm that he had been infected by the plague. Supercharged by the lightning storm blanketing the sky, Cole tailed the blast core all the way to the heart of gasworks. When he finally got his hands on it, Cole returned to Zeke's roof and used the blast core. In the morning, the Beast continued its rampage in the swamp, killing all of Nyx's children in the process. Not long after, Quo and Nyx gathered at Zeke's rooftop to witness Cole use the RFI. Before he did so, Cole explained that the Beast was not indiscriminately killing people, but rather activating as many conduits as it could to save what little part of humanity it could. He then held out the RFI and passed a current through it, unaware that in wiping the Rayfield radiation from the world, it would also be killing nearly every conduit. As Cole, Quo, and Nyx screamed out in agony, Zeke used the amp to hit the device out of Cole's hands. As Zeke assessed the damage dealt to the RFI, the group discussed the implications of using the device if it meant killing all conduits without a strict guarantee that it would permanently cure the plague. Zeke and Nyx were in favor of using the device. Zeke because he knew what it meant for humanity if the Beast continued its rampage, and Nyx because she was willing to do anything to kill the Beast after what it did to her children. Quo, on the other hand, wasn't willing to give up her own life. Rationalizing her fear, she stated that the Beast's methods were the only way to guarantee humanity's prolonged survival. Forced to choose, Cole was given the opportunity to side with Nyx, to stop the Beast like he had promised, or betray humanity by siding with Quo. If Cole had chosen the path of selfishness, if he had taken the supplies in Archer Square for himself, become the demon Empire City saw him as, activated the Ray Sphere rather than destroy it, and helped Nyx in her quest for revenge, Cole put his own life above humanity, above Zeke, by siding with the Beast. Alongside Quo, Cole escorted the Beast to the heart of New Marais. At the cathedral, Cole killed Nyx to secure the RFI for himself. Before he could get a hold of it, Zeke picked it up off the ground, leveled his gun at Cole, and fired a single shot at his best friend. Unfazed by the shot, Cole killed Zeke, then destroyed the RFI. It was then, when Cole had no other choice but to agree, that the Beast revealed the toll his abilities took on him. That unless Cole took the mantle of the Beast, humanity was doomed to succumb to the plague. With no other option, Cole accepted his fate. The conduits of New Marais at his side, Cole continued John's rampage, offering salvation at the cost of profound suffering. But that is not the Cole the world would come to know. Selfless, caring, and determined, Cole understood that the hard choice, the choice that required hope, was the correct one. Fulfilling his promise, Cole asked Zeke to repair the RFI. Afraid to die, Quo abandoned the group to side with the Beast. Over the next 3 hours, Zeke, assisted by LaRoche, constructed 3 charging stations to recharge the RFI due to its broken power regulator. When they were complete, Cole said his final goodbye to Zeke before he and Nix took off with the RFI to charge it. By the time they reached the first substation, the beast wasted no time in destroying it. Promising to watch their back, LaRoche told Cole to retreat to the second one. As he did so, the beast decimated nearly all militia and rebel forces, including LaRoche, in its pursuit of Cole. As Nix charged the RFI at the Cathedral charging station, Cole used everything in his power to stop the beast. When Quo arrived, Cole had no choice but to take her down. With Quo neutralized, Cole put the last of his energy into summoning an ionic storm. Seizing her opportunity, Nix sacrificed her own life to give Cole a chance to escape with the RFI. With the fully repaired RFI in hand, Cole made one last move against the beast, knocking it to the ground as he confronted Quo. After pleading for forgiveness, Quo told Cole to do what they set out to do. Without hesitation, Cole put everything he had into the RFI. Exactly as Wolf had designed it, the RFI cleansed humanity of Rayfield radiation, eliminating the plague while also killing what is believed to be a majority of the conduits around the world. While Zeke assumed that Cole's sacrifice would go completely unnoticed, New Murray did not forget what he had done for them. To honor his sacrifice, Bertrand's hateful propaganda was torn down. In its place, Cole's heroic image stood as a beacon of hope, a patron saint to unite New Murray. While the city celebrated Cole, all Zeke wanted was a moment alone with his best friend. As they sailed into the ocean, Zeke reflected on Cole's legacy. That while the world often thought of conduits and humans as completely different, Cole was definitive proof that nothing was further from the truth. Because there isn't anyone with more humanity than Cole McGrath. In the weeks following Cole's sacrifice, what remained of the United States military was deployed across the eastern seaboard to restore order. While initially relieved, Augustine's hopes were shattered when she and Celia were treated as the threat despite having done nothing wrong. Torn between her duties as a soldier and identity as a conduit, Augustine did the only thing she felt was right. Using her ability to manipulate concrete, she imprisoned Celia, cementing her legacy as a conduit who hunted down other conduits. However, for Augustine, this act wasn't so cut and dry. While yes, she did imprison conduits, it was simply a means to an end. She figured that if she was able to successfully handle the conduit threat, it would, at a minimum, give her some degree of control over how conduits were treated. She could handle conduits being seen as threats. As far as she was concerned, that was practically inevitable. What she couldn't handle was conduits being driven to extinction. So she alone made the choice to hunt them down, to trade their freedom for security before they were wiped out by those too fearful and ignorant to see their humanity. Roughly 1 year after Cole's sacrifice, conduits began mysteriously re-emerging around the world. While it is not known how exactly this happened, the state of the world suggests that the RFI's activation possibly mutated the surviving conduit's conduit gene, allowing them to activate their abilities in times of extreme duress rather than the previously required concentrated dose of neuroelectrical energy. Shortly following the conduit reemergence, the military was deployed across the United States to handle the chaos. After a string of incidents between conduits and the military, the President of the United States created the Department of Unified Protection via Emergency Executive Order. Headed by Lieutenant Colonel Augustine, the DUP's official purpose was to capture any and all known conduits, relabeled as bioterrorists, before they could inflict harm upon themselves or others. Upon capture, the bioterrorists were taken to Curtin K, an isolated detention center designed specifically to hold conduits. It was within Curtin K Augustine's true plan came to fruition. Rather than punish conduits, she used the security of the facility to teach them how to master their abilities for their own safety, and possibly more importantly, in preparation for the day conduits would rule the world. Given that this entire operation started with her, Celia was the first to master her paper abilities under Augustine's watch. Young and malleable, Celia, over the next 7 years, was transformed into Augustine's personal assassin. Soon after the DUP's inception, the department used Dr. Sebastian Wolf's research on conduits to create a number of new technologies, such as blast core relay stations, or core relays, as well as blast shard powered technology, like surveillance drones and mobile command units. But by far the two most important innovations were conduit genetic testing and power transfer technology, both of which were integral to the rapid expansion of the DUP. This expansion began when the government initiated mandatory genetic screenings to test for the conduit gene within soldiers. Those who tested positive, such as a man named Tanner Black, were then sent to the DUP with the promise that they would be, quote, helping ensure the safety of their fellow Americans. With a small army at their disposal, the DUP began experimenting with various abilities to force upon their soldiers using Wolf's research on conduit power transference. Abilities like wire, plant, glass, and even Celia's paper abilities were all considered. But in the end, it was decided that Augustine's concrete was the obvious choice, as it conveyed security and unity and was fairly easy to master. With an army of concrete soldiers at her disposal, Augustine's DUP swept across America, capturing just over 300 bioterrorists within the first year. It was during this period 3 conduits of importance manifested their abilities. Perhaps the first was a man named Hank Daughtry, who even before he got his powers, escaped from multiple prisons. Everything changed when he manifested smoke abilities, which he promptly used to pull off a string of heists, quickly attracting the attention of the DUP. Taken to Curtin K, Hank simply waited like he had done in every escape prior, knowing that at some point, he would be presented with a golden opportunity. Second was a teenage boy named Eugene Sims, who was relentlessly bullied by his peers at school. When they pushed him too far, his video abilities manifested, allowing him to create powerful constructs that he primarily based around his favorite video game, Heaven's Hellfire. Not long after, the DUP shipped Eugene off to Curtin K, where they utilized his constructs to train the other conduits. Last was a teenage girl named Abigail Fetch Walker, who began manifesting neon abilities. Terrified, Fetch's parents reported her to the DUP. A veteran of the DUP at this point, Tanner Black and his strike team were then sent to collect her. Before the strike team arrived, Fetch's brother Brent grabbed Fetch's hand, and together fled New Jersey. Over the next few years, the two of them traveled as far west as they could, eventually reaching the vibrant city of Seattle, Washington. 3 years after the DUP's inception, Augustine was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her, quote, accomplishment in making the world a safer place from the greatest threat to peace without a single death of bioterrorist or civilian. It was this very fact that led the United States government to give Augustine the unprecedented authority to declare martial law at will, allowing her to suspend the human rights and civil liberties of American citizens in order to contain the threat of bioterrorism. When Fetch and Brent eventually reached Seattle, the two of them were quickly approached by a group of drug dealers, who offered them the one thing that they had been looking for, an escape. While both of them indulged in the drugs, Brent was the first to kick the habit after seeing how it had warped his sister's mind. Willing to risk everything to save her, he made a plan to buy a boat and escape with Fetch to Canada, where she would be outside the DUP's jurisdiction and, more importantly, far away from her dealers. To this end, Brent began accepting increasingly risky jobs for a local drug lord named Shane to scrounge up as much cash as he could as quickly as possible. When he eventually returned home bruised and missing teeth, Fetch decided to go cold turkey on drugs to show Brent that she was just as serious as he was when it came to earning their freedom. By the time Brent had collected enough money to buy a small boat and enough supplies for he and Fetch's trip, Shane placed the remainder of Brent's cash in a duffel bag that Brent planned to grab just before he and Fetch skipped town. Little did he know, Shane's primary competitors, a Russian crime syndicate known as the Occurrence, learned of the pickup just minutes before Brent's planned arrival. On the night Brent and Fetch planned to flee for Canada, the two were confronted by a pair of police officers who had been searching for Brent. Believing it was their last night in the country, Fetch broke the pair's cardinal rule by using her powers to draw the police away from her brother, then make her way to the penthouse to grab the cash. Inside, she found a group of Occurrence, a duffel bag of cash, and a briefcase of explosives. While the penthouse erupted in flames, the Occurrence tracked down Brent, who they kidnapped before setting his boat ablaze. When Fetch arrived to see the aftermath of the event, she spent the rest of the night eagerly searching for her brother. The following day, Shane went looking for Brent at the docks, only to find Fetch mourning his disappearance. Before Shane left to track him down, Fetch demonstrated her powers, demanding that he tell her how to get the attention of the Occurrence. By the time she caused enough havoc to draw them out, Shane saw the potential in using her to eliminate his competition. After fulfilling a few tasks to gain Shane's favor, Fetch was sent to track down an Occurrence lieutenant who supposedly knew where Brent was being held. Assisted by Jenny, Shane's hacker, Fetch tracked the lieutenant using the city's security cameras, where she found a phone at the scene of a kidnapping. While Jenny analyzed the data on the phone's SIM card, Shane had Fetch thin the Occurrence herd. When they eventually tracked Brent's location to the docks, Shane had Fetch clear the area of Occurrence, securing the north half of Seattle as his territory. When the Occurrence were eliminated, Brent escaped inland just before the DUP cordoned off the area. After narrowly avoiding the DUP, Fetch found Brent in an alleyway. Shane, unwilling to let Fetch go free, took Brent hostage, promising to return him if Fetch continued doing what she was told. The stress of the event unveiled a power within Fetch, which she then used to escape to safety. Over the next few hours, the DUP placed Seattle under martial law. In the process, they imprisoned a dozen or so of Shane's thugs, who were then freed by Fetch per Shane's orders. Afterward, Jenny secretly helped Fetch track down and destroy a handful of police drones that Shane had gotten access to. She then sent Fetch to search shipping containers to find Brent, unknowingly revealing her betrayal to Shane, who then killed her. Without Jenny's assistance, Fetch had no choice but to help Shane complete one final job, gaining the favor of the chief of police. To do so, Fetch drew the attention of the DUP by causing havoc around the city, then protected Shane while he had a conversation with his new business partner. With the police under his thumb and the DUP tightening their grip on Seattle, Shane set up a trap for Fetch to eliminate his greatest liability. Once again, the stress of this event unlocked something within Fetch, allowing her to narrowly escape Shane's trap. When Fetch awoke hours later, she tore through the city to dismantle Shane's operation and find Brent. After destroying a handful of Shane's drug shipments, Shane invited her to join him and Brent at his main hideout, a club called the Crocodile. Inside the club, Shane injected Fetch with some kind of psychoactive drug, causing her to hallucinate that Brent had stolen her stash of drugs. When she came to, Brent's heart had been pierced by a single neon bolt. Absolutely devastated, Fetch didn't struggle one bit when the DUP arrested her and shipped her off to Curtin K. Over the next 2 years, the DUP succeeded in rounding up what was believed to be every bioterrorist in the United States. By all official measures, Augustine's mission was a resounding success. So successful, in fact, that she had made her own agency obsolete in the eyes of the federal government, who began cutting the DUP's funding. The final nail in the coffin was when they opted to transfer the responsibility of bioterrorist incarceration to military-run prisons, a move that would eliminate the need for the DUP in its entirety. Recognizing this as the greatest threat to her authority, Augustine turned her thoughts to the one weapon that had always served her best: fear. Fear of conduits and the destruction that they were capable of had built the DUP in the first place. If she wanted to preserve her department, all she needed to do was rekindle that fear in a way that can never be traced back to the DUP itself. Around early fall of 2018, 2 years after Fetch's capture, Augustine transferred her to Curtin K's training facility, where Fetch shared the story of her time in Seattle. In doing so, Augustine was able to develop a better understanding of Fetch's abilities and motivations. When Fetch was more powerful than ever, Augustine gave her the last thing she needed to realize her true potential, a chance to avenge Brent. So she had Shane brought to Curtin K, where she encouraged Fetch to use what she had learned to end his life. Overwhelmed with emotions, Fetch blew a hole in the side of Curtin K. Narrowly managing to survive the blast, Shane attempted to escape using a DUP APC. Tailing after him, Fetch tore through countless DUP soldiers, before eventually reaching Shane at the edge of a cliff. Taking her time, Fetch fired a handful of neon bolts into Shane's torso, before completely vaporizing him as punishment for what he had taken from her. While Fetch was taken back to Curtin K, Augustine set her grand plan into motion by selecting 4 specific individuals for the upcoming prisoner transfer, those being Fetch, Eugene, Hank, and Celia. From their training sessions, Augustine knew that the first 2 were the most likely to cause chaos if turned loose. Fetch due to her burning vendetta against drug dealers, and Eugene because of his crusade against bullies. Hank, meanwhile, provided a plausible method of escape given his prior record. Last but not least was Celia. Unlike the others, Augustine planned to use Celia to assassinate those who spoke out against conduits in the DUP. Knowing this would be easily traced back to her, Augustine planned to help Celia escape Curtin K unnoticed. This plan involved Celia faking her own suicide, then using the prisoner transfer to mask her escape. Not long after, the military arrived to transfer a group of bioterrorists to an army prison in upstate Washington. As planned, Celia used the transfer to escape, while Augustine ensured Fetch, Eugene, and Hank were the 3 individuals the army received, and that Hank was presented with his golden opportunity. As the transport truck made its way to upstate Washington, it neared a small fishing town named Salmon Bay, home to the Ocomish tribe. At this same time, a delinquent named Delson Rowe vandalized a billboard congratulating his brother Reggie on his new position as the town's sheriff. When Reggie arrived to put an end to Delson's antics, Delson retreated into the fish cannery, where he ran into Betty, a sort of mother figure for he and Reggie. Graceful as always, Betty pointed Delson toward the Ocomish longhouse, where he could establish an alibi while she dealt with Reggie. However, when Delson arrived at the longhouse, Reggie ambushed him about the childish vandalism. As the two argued, a certain transport truck toppled over directly in front of them, pinning Hank to the ground, while Fetch and Eugene made a run for Seattle. As Reggie tailed the escaped prisoners, Delson freed Hank from the debris. When Reggie returned, Hank, willing to do anything to escape before Augustine arrived, used Delson as a human shield. As Hank fired a warning shot at Reggie, Delson grabbed hold of Hank's hand, activating his latent conduit abilities. One that allowed him to channel the power of other conduits by making direct contact with their hand. In addition to being granted a lesser version of Hank's smoke abilities, Delson was given a glimpse into his memories. When Delson awoke, barely managing to control his new abilities, he used them to rescue Reggie, then make his way to the cannery to confront Hank. Using a loose chain he had found, Delson broke into the cannery, then drove Hank outside, where he and Delson were ambushed by the DUP. After detaining Hank, Augustine interrogated Delson. When Betty protested, Delson was forced to choose between revealing his conduit abilities or letting Augustine tear the information from Betty and the Ocomish. If Delson chose to keep his mouth shut, Augustine embedded dozens of innocent Ocomish with concrete daggers until she concluded that they were unwilling to rat out Delson. If Delson instead chose to reveal his abilities, Augustine thought the truth of how he got them so absurd that she tortured the Ocomish anyway. Over the next few hours, the DUP set up a blockade between Salmon Bay and Seattle to stop Fetch and Eugene. When they promptly tore through them and reached Seattle, the two went their separate ways. Continuing her quest to avenge Brent, Fetch set up a camp in the north half of Seattle, where she targeted the very drug dealers that she had put into power 2 years prior. Eugene, meanwhile, went south into the Lantern District, where he would later primarily help suspected conduits escape from the DUP. Taking advantage of the both of them was Celia, who began staging her assassinations to make it look like it had been done by the escaped conduits. Over the next few days, the DUP placed Seattle under martial law, giving Augustine the authority to commandeer the Channel 6 news station tower, as well as the iconic Space Needle. The former she personally used for DUP operations, while the latter served as a massive centralized communications antenna. With complete command of the city, the DUP transformed the landscape of Seattle, erecting countless checkpoints, suspicion pens, command centers, and core relays, as well as deploying hundreds of surveillance drones to show the world just how serious of a threat bioterrorists were. 1 week after the crash, Delson awoke in the Longhouse, finding Betty and the others had been severely injured by Augustine. While Delson assumed they were in recovery, Reggie had learned from the doctors that the concrete in their bodies would kill them unless Augustine removed it herself. Inspired by Reggie's statement, Delson planned to make his way to Seattle and siphon some of Augustine's power to save the Comish. While Reggie noted the improbability of their success, he reluctantly agreed, if only to keep Delson from getting himself killed. On their way to Seattle, Delson and Reggie came across the aftermath of Fetch and Eugene's battle with the DUP. Forced to continue on foot, Delson eventually came into contact with a core relay. For reasons unknown, Delson, unlike all other conduits of his time, was somehow capable of absorbing the blast core energy, as well as the energy of blast shards, to expand his abilities instantaneously. When he and Reggie eventually reached Seattle, they were funneled into a DUP checkpoint, where Delson's conduit gene immediately triggered an alarm. Thrust into conflict, Delson destroyed a nearby mobile command center, then absorbed the power of a few more blast core relays. Hours later, Reggie sent Delson to dismantle the communications equipment adorning the Space Needle. After doing so, Delson took the opportunity to tag the DUP's flag with his own symbol of rebellion. In the wake of Delson's little stunt, Reggie looked into the escaped conduit's activities, while Delson was contacted by two individuals, Tanner Black and Raymond Wolf, Sebastian Wolf's brother. Tanner reached out to Delson via Dead Drop to shed light on the DUP's activities, as he had become disillusioned with Augustine's leadership. Wolf, meanwhile, pointed Delson to a dead drop of his own that detailed his most recent report on the DUP's knowledge of the re-emergence of the conduit gene. Promising to stay in touch, Wolf continued to investigate the DUP, while Delson was sent by Reggie to investigate two of Fetch's crime scenes. As Delson investigated the second one, Fetch caught his attention, leading Delson straight to her sniper's nest, where they found the name and drawing of Brent. Plugging this into the Seattle PD database, Reggie found the location where Brent had been killed. Afterward, Wolf sent Delson to rescue his editor at the docks, which turned out to be a trap the DUP set to kill Wolf. While Wolf continued his investigation, Delson staked out a large neon sign, hoping to ambush Fetch. When Fetch arrived hours later, Delson grabbed her hand, channeling her neon power and giving him a glimpse into her memories. When he came to, he tailed her to the Crocodile Club and once again probed into her memories. When he was later awoken by Reggie, Reggie attempted to take Fetch into custody. Presented with a choice, Delson could either corrupt Fetch by claiming her as his to influence, or redeem her by trusting her enough to take responsibility for her actions. Either way, afterward, Fetch helped Delson track down a handful of core relays to expand his neon abilities. When Delson had a handle on his new power set, Wolf had him follow a DUP informant to the site of a secret DUP meeting. After dispersing the agents, Delson collected intelligence that confirmed Wolf's suspicions that not all conduits had been killed by the RFI. Wolf then put Delson into contact with Zeke, who for the past half-decade had been working undercover as part of an anti-DUP resistance movement. Soon after, Delson helped Fetch in her quest to avenge Brent. If Delson had corrupted her, he assisted her in crippling members of an anti-conduit activist organization called Lifeline Purity. Afterward, they publicly executed the organization's head in Seattle before hooking up. If he had redeemed Fetch, he helped her destroy drug shipments at the docks, then track down and clear their main distribution center before, of course, hooking up. In the morning, Reggie got word that more conduit activity had been spotted in the Lantern District. Before checking it out, Delson was frantically contacted by Wolf, who was in the process of being ambushed by the DUP. Before Delson reached him, Wolf managed to stash his research alongside his final message on a dead drop that he hid nearby. By the time Delson arrived and took down the DUP, Wolf had already been killed. He then followed the clues to Wolf's dead drop, which Zeke had him leave at a discreet location. In return for Delson's help, Zeke gave him Cole's jacket, a permanent reminder that Delson, from then on out, would embody Cole's legacy. It was around this point Delson's actions had begun to change Celia's view of Augustine. Having never really known a life outside Curtain K, Celia had placed her trust in Augustine without question. Trust that Augustine was all too willing to exploit. Delson, however, offered her a new way of seeing the world. Unlike Augustine, he did not fear humanity, nor did he hesitate to challenge the status quo to protect his people. Realizing this, Celia chose to play both sides of the conflict, by following Augustine's orders like she had been told, but also cluing Delson into her murders. To do just that, Celia began deliberately leaving a convoluted paper trail that would eventually lead Delson to uncovering the truth about those she chose to murder, the DUP, and herself. Setting her plan into motion, Celia confronted Delson inside Fetch's hideout, where she then led him to the scene of her first series of murders, starting with a drug dealer named Skeeter Hidalgo. Upon further investigation, Delson was able to track down the corpse of Hidalgo's associate, Killian Chalov. He then followed a modified tracker drone that led to the side of a lockbox that eventually pointed him to the Crocodile Club, where he found Killian's former employer, a man named Jonas Petrovich, had been murdered. While Celia plotted her next series of murders, Delson traveled south toward the Lantern District. Along the way, Augustine confronted him to confirm the rumor that Delson was somehow capable of replicating conduit abilities. When he was forced into confirming this rumor, Augustine encased his legs in concrete. As he attempted to reason his way out of the situation, one of Eugene's angel constructs captured and released Delson into the Lantern District. Not long after, Eugene called Delson somewhat anonymously to recruit him into helping rescue suspected conduits from a DUP convoy. Later, Delson helped Eugene search for 3 DUP prison buses full of suspected conduits, each of which Eugene's angels managed to snatch up before Delson could get to them. Afterward, Eugene pointed Delson to an escaped conduit, who had managed to remove his vest and escape to a nearby construction site. When Delson went to rescue him, an angel snatched him straight out of the sky and carried him off to Eugene's lair. To figure out where exactly the angels were taking these suspects, Reggie donned a suspected conduit vest and attracted enough attention to get caught by one of Eugene's angels, leading Delson straight to Eugene's lair. Inside, Delson was pulled into Eugene's video domain, where he took the form of an angelic deity named He Who Dwells. Following their battle, Delson grabbed Eugene's hand, channeling his video power and revealing his memories. When Reggie arrived to help them, he once again proposed that they take Eugene into custody. With that, Delson had a choice to corrupt Eugene by provoking him into becoming a bully himself, or redeem him by helping him build his confidence and save the innocent. Before he could do that, however, Delson had to master his new power set. The only problem was that by taking video, it had seemingly stripped him of all of his powers. Terrified, Delson reached out to Reggie, who was initially relieved that Delson's condition had been solved, and that they had no choice but to go home. When Delson refused to do so, Reggie relented and helped him open 2 nearby core relays. When Delson was capable of handling himself, he abandoned Reggie and reached out to Eugene with help for hunting the rest of them. Afterward, if Delson had decided to corrupt Eugene, the two of them went on a rampage against the Occurrence and the DUP for their poor treatment of conduits, which ultimately ended with Eugene coming to understand that with his great power, he would never have to worry about bullies ever again. If instead Delson chose to redeem him, the two worked to dismantle the Occurrence's suspected conduit trafficking operation, which ended with Eugene gaining enough confidence that he was able to once again find hope in humanity. It was around this point Celia led Delson to unearth her next series of murders. The first was the deputy director of the DUP, Samuel Fishbein. Using his credentials, Delson gained access to the DUP intranet, where he uncovered hints of Celia's time within Curtin K. He was then sent to investigate the death of a DUP defense attorney named Linda Criley, which ultimately pointed him to the corpse of Marcus Paulson, the very judge who ruled in favor of giving Augustine the unilateral authority to declare martial law. As Delson carried out his investigation, Augustine, desperate to rein Delson in before he toppled her entire department, took Hank's daughter hostage to force Hank into luring Delson into a trap in exchange for his and his daughter's freedom. Released into Seattle, Hank began killing DUP soldiers to attract Delson's attention. While Delson was distracted by Hank, the DUP captured Fetch and Eugene, who were then taken to a giant concrete platform the DUP had built in Puget Sound. When Delson eventually got into contact with Hank, Hank laid out an all too simple plan to rescue Fetch and Eugene. While at first Reggie refused to help them in this plan, when Delson and Hank met a couple of hours later, Reggie joined them with the understanding that, conduit or not, Fetch and Eugene were people in need of help. Using a conveniently placed vent, Delson and Hank infiltrated the platform, while Reggie commandeered a boat. When Delson and Hank reached a fake core relay, Augustine bounded Delson's hand in concrete and let Hank go free as promised. As Augustine reveled in victory, Reggie fired a rocket directly into her, giving Delson a chance to escape. When the two of them met up at the heart of the compound, Reggie freed Delson from his bondage, then discussed the plan to free Fetch and Eugene. As they did so, Augustine pinned Reggie's legs to the ground before collapsing the platform under his feet. Grabbing hold of his brother's hand, Delson watched as Reggie was slowly enveloped in concrete from the feet up. Before it could envelop him fully, Reggie chose to sacrifice himself by letting go of Delson's hand. Blinded by grief and rage, Delson gave Augustine everything he had. While Augustine would ultimately survive the onslaught, Delson completely destroyed the concrete structure in the process. By nightfall, Delson managed to find his way back to solid ground. Determined to avenge Reggie, or at the very least get some answers, Delson tracked Hank all the way to the docks, where Hank's daughter was waiting to leave with him. Enraged, Delson wrapped his chain around Hank's neck. If he had been ruthless up until this point, Delson choked Hank to death in front of his daughter. If Delson had played the hero, however, he couldn't bring himself to end Hank's life, knowing that he was only doing what he had to in order to save his daughter. Either way, with Hank out of the equation, Delson had only one thing left to do, the very thing he came to Seattle to accomplish. At the foot of Augustine's tower, Delson shut off power to the electric fence, fortifying her fortress. As he ascended the tower, Fetch and Eugene offered their assistance in taking down the DUP. At the tower's zenith, Fetch cut a hole into the roof of the building, which Delson then exploited to drop into the building. If Delson had become a monster, Augustine simply thanked him for serving as a prime example for why the DUP was needed. If instead Delson had become the hero, Augustine attempted to convince him to use his popularity in favor of the DUP. When Delson refused to do so, a fight broke out between the two of them. When she was quickly bested by Delson, Augustine offered her hand, knowing that he would learn the truth about the DUP and gain her power, but that in the process, he would be temporarily stripped of all his other powers. As Delson struggled to endure against Augustine, Eugene periodically tossed him core relays to expand his concrete arsenal, which eventually gave Delson all the power he needed to defeat Augustine. If Delson had truly become infamous at this point, Delson threw Augustine's body from the tower, instantly killing her on impact. With nobody to stop them, Delson, Fetch, and Eugene took complete control of Seattle. Of course, Delson also planned a trip to Curtin K, if only to shake every conduit's hand as he set them free. Before then, however, Delson had one last promise to fulfill back at Salmon Bay. Yet, opposed to what he had selfishly expected, Betty didn't welcome him with open arms, despite the fact that he was the only person who could save them. Instead, she denounced his heinous actions and stated that she never wished to see him again. Absolutely enraged, Delson channeled all of his anger into an orbital drop that wiped out the Akomish tribe. If Delson had become the hero, however, he simply shed light on Augustine's corruption. Then, with the help of Fetch and Eugene, dismantled the DUP's operation in Seattle. Of course, he also planned a trip to Curtin Cay to free those who had been wrongfully imprisoned. But before then, Delson had one last thing to do in Salmon Bay. Welcomed with open arms, he healed Betty and the others using his new gift, then used his old one to pay tribute to his brother. With Augustine finally out of the picture, Celia, determined to show Delson a vast conspiracy taking place under his nose, led him to a series of attempted murders. However, this time they had not been carried out by Celia, but rather Senator Jeffrey Wingard, an anti-bioterrorist radicalist who had staged multiple assassination attempts to gain the public's favor. Following Celia's series of clues, Delson eventually tracked down Wingard just before an actual assassination attempt nearly claimed his life. Continuing to investigate, Delson eventually found that Wingard was nothing more than a pawn for his largest donor, Jonas Petrovich, who Celia had previously murdered inside the Crocodile Club. With that out of the way, Celia pointed Delson toward a Lifeline Purity online forum, which revealed that a group of radicals had been murdering suspected conduits throughout Seattle, the precise thing that Augustine had worked to prevent. Investigating further, he found that the prime suspect was a DUP soldier named Felix Coogan, who had been given a list of suspected conduits by a prominent DUP scientist. To put an end to their little plot, Delson confronted Coogan and confiscated the list. Soon after, Celia guided Delson to unfolding a conspiracy between the DUP and the Department of Armed Forces, who were slated to be given at least some of the DUP's responsibilities following their dissolution. During this current transition period, however, the department began spying on the DUP using a fleet of disguised surveillance vans, which Celia eventually tricked Delson into destroying, ultimately framing him for the murder of General Rufus Mortimer. With the final conspiracy uncovered and Delson having done everything Celia expected of him, all that was left was for Celia to show Delson the truth. Following the paper trail to its end, Celia revealed to Delson that she was done waiting for the world to accept their kind. That if those years of imprisonment had taught her anything, it was that conduits were never going to be given their freedom, and that if they really wanted it, they would have to take it for themselves. As usual, I want to start this off by saying thank you guys so much for watching the video. Honestly, this has been something I've wanted to do for a while now because I've been craving playing Infamous for the longest time. So basically, this was my excuse to do that, while also attempting to make the definitive Infamous story summary and lore deep dive video. And now at this point, all I can really hope for is that you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it, because it truly was a blast to make. That said, the nature of making a video this all-encompassing means it will likely, and unfortunately, be my final Infamous video. Not saying I'll never stream it in the future or react to my other Infamous videos, because I do at least plan to do the latter, but as for main channel like lore videos, this pretty much covers everything short of fan theories. Well, actually, that's not exactly true because I do plan on making a very, and I mean very short members only video covering Festival of Blood, since it's not really canon and its inclusion would have thrown off the pacing of this video. So if you do want to see that, join the channel and help support the high quality content. Speaking of which, a huge thank you to longtime channel members Ashton, CSC Dog, StaleCoconuts, Ian, Hunter, and Solar, as well as new members like GLF4E, Lazy Gaming 69, Chasen Peck, Faded Jaded, Paul Evans, Nurset J191, Finmertens, Wonder Chia, Corgi-san, and Project P, Again, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, and if you would like to do so as well, there's a link in the description to become a member, as well as an info card at the top of the screen. I also want to thank Lamadia, or Hannah, whose videos I used for some of the paper trail footage since the website was taken offline by Sucker Punch, so there was no real way to get it myself. Other than that, the last and honestly most important thing I want to say is that Kessler does still owe Cole that $500. So, here's hoping for a sequel.